All right. Hi, everybody. How we doing? How was lunch? Yeah? I didn't have any, so... don't worry, I don't think I'll waste away while I'm standing up here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Ellis. I'm the president of Atheists of Utah. It's the largest secular organization here in Utah, or as the locals would say, behind the Zion curtain. We are the local affiliate group of American Atheists. Welcome to our workshop on So You Think You Know Mormonism. Who here is a foreman, as Brian Keith Dalton would say? Just 3, 4? How is a foreman a former Mormon? All right, so not very many. Who here knows nothing or next to nothing about Mormonism? Oh, shit. The church isn't fulfilling their mission. I was hoping I could just skip over the whole intro to it, but that's all right. We can do that. They've got pamphlets and guys with name tags, easily identifiable by their clean white shirts.
Everything I know about Mormonism I learned from South Park. So
it's actually a very accurate. I mean, they added a few things, but it's pretty accurate.
So is the Book of Mormon.
Big love.
That's pretty accurate as well.
Yeah.
Big love.
So I never, I was raised LDS pretty much. My parents were kind of Jack Mormon. It's a term Utahns use for people who were raised or have family members who are very LDS, and they're not. They're kind of the black sheep. Jack Mormons would include people who do things like watch R-rated movies, drink coffee, maybe not go to church every Sunday. Have beards, yeah. Which is a switch, because the church started out with its leaders all having, pretty glorious beards. Like I said, I was raised fairly LDS. I was baptized at the tender age of 8, which is what happens in the LDS Church. You may have seen Joanne last night. Who here was at the thing last night? Awesome. So you already know how cool Joanne is. You don't know how cool. You may not yet know how cool West is, but you will shortly. I never really had a strong testimony in the LDS Church, and stopped attending in my early teens, in large part because I thought it was boring. I never had a testimony of it. I never had the burning in the bosom. I had the burning in the bosom, staying home and watching cartoons and stuff like that. So, even when my father baptized me, I wasn't really excited to be baptized. Honestly, I had no idea what it meant. I'd been told that my sins would be washed away, and I was like, because I drew on the wall, Jesus is going to make that okay now? Okay. I was mainly excited to get presents and stuff afterward. There was kind of a big family party, when you get baptized. And then I was really disappointed that all of the presents were, the quad, the Book of Mormon, Pearl of Great Price, right, Doctrine and Covenants.
I also got this when I was baptized at 8.
Basically my presents consisted of Mormon propaganda and Mormon coloring books, and that was pretty disappointing. It was good to spend time with my family. I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists. You may have seen West Monette and his smiling family on the first billboards that were put up ahead of the convention here. You may have also read some of the things, some of the fantastic responses that West was posting all over the place for those who were critical of him and his family for having the audacity to allow their children to pose on an atheist billboard with them, as if the reverse is somehow much more acceptable. West was raised in a devout Mormon family. His father was an LDS Church educator. His father was a bishop and a stake leader. A bishop, for those who don't know, is kind of the local church leader. for a smallish, neighborhood-sized congregation. A stake president or the stake leadership are the people who are in charge of, a number of bishops in different wards within their stake. West's mother also served in the LDS Church. She was a Mormon Relief Society and primary president. West himself served a mission for the LDS Church and later held a number of teachings and leadership positions. So we saw that most of you here were at the thing last night with Joanne and David Silverman and the BYU professors. So that's awesome. You guys already know that she's really cool. Joanne is an ex-Mormon, ex-polygamist, which is, there's traditional or more mainstream Mormonism, and then there's fundamentalist, crazy town, polygamist sect Mormonism, and then there's kind of in the middle. Joanne's was, I would say, kind of in the middle, because it doesn't sound like it was nearly as bad as like Warren Jeffs and the craziness that goes on there. But if you haven't read her book, you should check it out. It's Not About the Sex My Ass. Really, really good. Besides being an author and having a very interesting history, Joanne's also an accomplished portrait and landscape artist, and I keep forgetting that. But I went, actually, when I was trying to finish up my thing last night, I went and looked at your website, and I'm very impressed. I'm artistically challenged, so I'm always really impressed when people can do things like that. We know that only a few of you in here are former Mormons. I was really surprised at how many of you don't really know a lot about the LDS Church. I'm surprised that you haven't had some plucky 19 or 20-year-old kids knocking on your door on the weekend and, inviting you to come and take a look at the LDS Church because it's super awesome.
We don't let them in.
Well, and I was kind of wondering that too. Like, how many of you have had have spoken to LDS missionary or had them come to your door?
Well, I actually just asked them.
Yeah, it's 2 questions.
Oh, sorry, okay. Yeah, I always think it's funny that, these 19 and 20-year-old kids think that they have all of life's problems sorted out and Jesus has made everything okay for them. So, real quick, because I want to turn most of the time over to West and Joanne, just a real quick 30,000-foot view, overview of the LDS Church, is that it was started in the 1820s by Joseph Smith, who, by most accounts of people outside the LDS faith, was a very charismatic con man. He used seer stones to translate some golden tablets that were buried in a hill after being visited by, depending on which account of the first vision you go by, I think there's at least 5, up to 7 or 8, I think.
There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. The LDS Church has recently acknowledged this with some essays on their website, which are pretty fun to read. Anyway, he used some seer stones in a hat to translate some golden plates that now it seems that nobody else has ever seen. There initially were accounts of witnesses who said that they had seen the plates. Most of them have since recanted that story. And of course, the plates are now gone. Nobody knows where they are.
Or they saw them with spiritual eyes.
Yes.
Spiritual eyes.
Yeah. Or they claimed that they may not have seen them in first person in real life, but through their spiritual eyes and the power of God, they were able to view the golden plates that Joseph was translating. As I said, there are a lot of different versions of the first vision of Joseph Smith. Basically, I think the currently adopted LDS Church's position on the first vision was that Joseph Smith was troubled. He was trying to find the true church back in his time in New York in the 1820s. There was a fairly large Christian revivalist movement going on at the time. Excuse me. So he searched and wandered off into the woods and prayed and was was visited by both God and Jesus, who told him that none of the churches that were around at the time were the true church, and that his life's mission, as granted to him by God, would be to restore God's one true church on the face of the earth. And in order to do that, he would need to go and find these golden plates, translate them, and present a new or another testament of Jesus Christ, which is what the Mormons refer to as the Book of Mormon. The Mormons were basically chased out of New York. There's a whole lot of history that goes on there, but they were basically chased out of New York and settled in Kirtland, Ohio, and hoped to establish a permanent New Jerusalem, or Zion City, in Jackson County, Missouri, of all places, which is also where they believe the Garden of Eden was, because several or different Israelite tribes traveled to North America via submarine with Jesus, and yeah, I'm not making this up. This is the really fun stuff. So they traveled by submarine to North America with Jesus, and created this great land in
Wooden submarines.
yeah, wooden submarines even.
They're much more pressure resistant.
Really, they were barrels.
They didn't go very
One
deep.
hole at the top and one hole at the bottom.
Yeah. They did float. They said they floated. Yeah.
Which day? When I was 7 or 8.
You didn't ask your mom and dad, really?
Really, this is crazy. See, and that's
We don't have all the answers.
yeah. That was one of the reasons. That's one of the things that led me out of the church, is that, even before I was baptized and when I was really young, it seemed to me that I was just annoying all the church teachers, primary teachers, the bishop, whoever I could talk to and ask questions, because I had this seemingly endless supply of really uncomfortable questions that they either didn't want to answer or didn't have an answer for, and they would try, and they would initially try to be nice, but as anybody from Utah knows, Mormons are very, very passive aggressive, and after not being able to answer my questions very well, they would usually just say, well, you just need to go and pray about it. I've got other things to do, leave me alone, quit bothering me. So, not being able to have any of my questions answered was one of the big reasons why I left the church also. So they tried to settle in Jackson County, Missouri. Once again, they were forced to leave Missouri for Nauvoo, Illinois. There are a lot of reasons why the LDS religion was chased, basically from New York out to Utah. Most of it is because they were doing crazy shit, and or there were other religions who didn't like any competing mythology in the area. So they were chased. They were chased from Missouri. They went to Nauvoo, Illinois, and they settled there for a few years before Joseph Smith was killed by an angry mob of people while he was just awaiting trial in the jail, right? He hadn't. I think they had pressed charges. They'd arrested him, put he and his brother in jail, and an angry mob basically stormed the jail, shot Joseph Smith and his brother. Yes?
Wasn't part of the mob trying to release him? Because they gave him a pistol or something, and he took 3 people out with him.
There were, someone.
He did have a gun.
Yeah, he did have a gun. They part of the mob wasn't trying to get him out. Someone prior to the mob basically storming the jail could see the writing on the wall that, shit was going south, and he needed some way to possibly try to defend himself. So yeah, he was given a pistol, and by most accounts, I believe he shot at least 3 people. I don't recall if there's any evidence that any of them died, but I would guess at least they had a really shitty day.
What was he in jail for?
Isn't this going to be burned out in the newspaper building?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, he destroyed a printing press. Who was Yeah, freedom of the press and free will, unless I don't agree with what you're saying, and then I'm going to burn your shit down. Yeah, he had destroyed a printing press, and the local townspeople got really upset about that. So Smith's death led to a succession crisis within the church because they hadn't really, their church was still new enough that they hadn't really established a line of succession. After his death, there were several splinter groups that kind of took off, different chunks of people within the main branch of Mormonism. Ultimately, Brigham Young ended up being his successor, and he's the one who led the Mormons here to beautiful Utah, where we all now sit listening to how crazy all of this stuff is. And they settled here in Utah. Of course, they all lived happily ever after, except for the elevated number of teen suicides and drug-addicted housewives we have here in Utah because of the LDS faith, in large part. Anyway, there are so many things that are about the LDS Church that I think are entirely batshit crazy or entirely immoral, against any kind of humanism or secular values. Ultimately, we can get to those at the end, but I wanted to turn the time over to West and Joanne. I will have West kick things off.
Awesome.